Hi, and welcome to Is 2017 the Year of OTT, featuring dataxu's Senior Director of TV Solutions, Adam Markey, and special guest speaker, Forrester Research Principal Analyst, Jim Nail. First, going over some housekeeping items. Attendees will all be in listen-only mode for the duration of the webinar. We also have some time reserved at the end of the webinar for questions. Please use the question portal in the control panel to submit those. Following the presentation, we'll also send out a recording of the webinar. Thanks for joining us today, and I'll turn it over to Adam to kick us off.
Awesome. So thanks everybody for joining. I'm super excited to have Jim with us to talk through the future of OTT, as well as kind of where TV buying is going. And at the end, we're going to share a little bit about what we've learned doing some pretty cool data activation things in the connected TV and OTT world as well. And just to give a little intro to dataxu and who we are, you may know us as a leading DSP out there activating marketing campaigns across native, video, mobile, desktop, social, and as well as TV. I lead up the TV part of that. But we also have a couple other product sets out there around, number one, looking at your overall marketing investment in your marketing portfolio across all channels, even within walled gardens, with offline and online measurement, kind of building that. It's a kind of a deterministic way of identifying what your optimal marketing allocation should be. It's called Market Pulse. And then outside of that, OneView, a product that I was actually instrumental in, which is cross-device data activation and identity management, that we've actually recently broken out of our DSP as a standalone product to take your audiences and really activate and measure with data everywhere. We're kind of super excited about that one. But for now, we're going to focus the rest of the webinar on OTT, connected TV, and all the things that are happening. So I'm really excited to kick it over to Jim right now to go into his research and findings on the Forrester side.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Adam. Appreciate it. And thank you, all the listeners here, for taking some time out of your day to tune in on this absolutely fascinating subject of, what is going on in television these days. For a little bit of background, back in my early career, I was on the advertising agency side of the world, but I was a little bit of an odd duck. I was in the direct marketing group at Ogilvy and Mather, but worked on accounts like American Express and Camelon Lawn Services, where there was a lot of TV, and so I ended up interacting a lot with colleagues on the TV side of things. And as a direct marketer, I thought the way TV was planned and bought and the way you measured it, was kind of crazy. But I got to appreciate what it does, extraordinarily well, and how it plays a different role, and so you really do need to think about it differently. Fast forward now to where we're in this world where we've got television changing and kind of intersecting and colliding with digital in the form of OTT, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a second. And I see that same kind of clash of mindsets. And so hopefully with my comments today, we can straighten that out. Forrester's mantra here is challenge thinking, lead change. And that is certainly appropriate here. We know we're in a world of change. We know that in order to evolve and adapt to that change, you've got to be willing to challenge the way things have been done and be looking forward. So just a quick definition of OTT. That's kind of a inside baseball term that we hear, that you'll hear about or read about in the news and things like that. It's short for what's called over the top, OTT, over the top, and that in its simplistically just really means any television programming that is delivered on the internet, or pretty much delivered in some way other than a traditional cable, satellite, Verizon, Fios, ATT, Uverse kind of service. So we've got Hulu, we've got Roku, we've got DirecTV Now, Sling, etc. Those are all kind of the OTT things. All right, so now we're ready to dive into it. We go back to my slide of is TV dying? And that's kind of the companion question that goes with this idea of, is this the year of OTT? And when we do that, we have to be very careful about what we mean when we say TV is dying. TV could mean the device. And on the right-hand side there, I think you can still walk into any man cave anywhere in this country, and the center point of it will be that nice 42 to 60-inch television screen. And if you walk into any Best Buy, Costco, Sam's Club, et cetera, you are greeted first thing with a giant wall of giant screens. So the device, the television set, is certainly not dying. TV can also mean the content, the programming. And when you look at it over the last couple of years, you know, shows like, I used Empire there a second ago. Here we've got Game of Thrones. We've got now Transparent on Amazon. We've got Orange is the New Black, House of Cards on Netflix. 13 Reasons Why. All this amazing content out there that tells you that the content is more powerful than ever. And maybe we shouldn't call it TV content. Maybe we should just call it long-form video entertainment content. It's a nice, easy-to-use phrase, right? Sorry about that, but I can't think of anything shorter and more succinct. But, you know, this is one of the eternal truths that we need to understand, that is not ever going to change. That people are going to, you know, go to work every day. They're going to come home after a long, tiring day of work. They're going to want to sit down on the couch after dinner and be entertained. They're going to watch long-form video entertainment content. So that is not going to change. Go on to the next slide, if you would. So these are some comments from one of our communities that we run here, where we hear people very explicitly say this. This woman in her 40s, for me, the con of using Amazon Prime is the small computer screen. This would be different if I could connect my Wii to my 46-inch TV screen. And my first question for her is, well, what is your Wii connected to? And I guess my second question is, well, if you're in your early 40s, you probably have a kid who's a tween or early teens. Just ask them, they'll hook it up for you. But anyway, that's kind of the state of the world, at least a couple of years ago. It's changing slowly, but, you know, clearly, you know, here's this statement that, gee, I want it on my big screen. I don't want these little screens. And a man in his 30s here says, I mainly watch TV on a television because I like the bigger screen. I've streamed once or twice. The screen's too small and only one person can watch. If I had a larger screen or internet TV, I'd probably stream more shows. So again, the power of that device, but also the power of that content. Let's keep going here. But their habits are changing a bit as they get used to some of these other sources of content. Up in the upper left here, another woman in her 40s. Less channel surfing. I usually know what I want to watch and watch it. Less saying what's on tonight. So no flipping through those terrible program guides that all the cable companies have that are, you know, still relics of the 1980s. And I know certainly my personal viewing habits have changed that way as well. But also these other two comments here say similar kinds of things. It's also not it's not only about that long-form entertainment content, whether it's talks, tutorials, DIY presentations, TED Talks, things like that. People are starting to discover some of these other forms of content that don't exist on traditional television from the traditional networks or traditional TV studios, but are on these other formats. So what is dying? TV, as a scheduled mass medium, is dying. Again, here's one of those lovely TV guide, program guides on a MVPD system. The idea that everybody is going to sit down at 8 o'clock on Thursday night and tune into something that is presented to them in this grid, that is the thing that is dying. And with that, of course, comes a tremendous amount of change in the whole advertising and content ecosystem. And certainly for us marketers, the way we think about reaching our audiences will have to change, as we can no longer count on reaching the size of audience and everybody we want just on this scheduled mass medium thing. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so Jim, I actually have a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
So, how are marketers treating the challenge of, say I'm in my basement streaming a live Formula One race, but I'm watching it on my VR headset. How does that change what they need to do and how they reach audiences and measure?
If you're going to talk specifically about VR, you are so far out on the bleeding edge that marketers don't even have to worry about that.
Okay.
For all of the VR is one of those much hyped, much obsessed about technologies that is still trying to find a solution, and you don't need to worry about it. But the idea that you're on one set watching something via an OTT channel, and maybe your wife is somewhere else in the house watching something else on her tablet, and your kids are somewhere else watching, that's another story, and that we'll talk a little bit about how you blend these different sources into a plan.
Makes sense.
But this does, I think, lead into, so okay, where is OTT fitting into consumer viewing habits, and how big is it really? This is data from Forrester's Consumer Technographics Survey data, which is the largest survey of consumer ownership and behaviors of technology in the country. And I break this down by generation, Gen Z and Gen Y, basically millennials, and Gen X. To show you that there is a very strong generational component to the use of OTT. And you'll see here that online or OTT viewing is maybe roughly half, maybe a little bit more of total viewing, but it has not killed off offline viewing yet, even among the Gen Zs. And probably the most interesting question in my mind today is when you look at the Gen Ys. They're just that little bit older that, when they were 16 to their early 20s, OTT wasn't really around, so they didn't develop a habit of OTT then. And as they're getting into that late 20s, early 30s, prime home, family, career building aspect of their lives, do they settle down a little bit more and maybe spend more time with a TV set as opposed to their mobile device? I don't know. I think that is only something we'll see over time. But you can certainly see Gen X, a much smaller proportion of their time spent viewing stuff online. Definitely, as I say here, it's complementing what they're viewing offline, but by no means is it taking over their viewing as well. But you can see, over the past couple of years, a growth in that amount of time, though the last couple of years it seems like maybe it's kind of plateaued a bit. That Gen Z in particular is kind of interesting. It's bouncing around between that 9.5 to 10 hours for online viewing, but not continuing to grow. Kind of interesting. So let's jump ahead to the next slide here. A couple more of these quotes. So what's missing? Why can't people just completely cut the cord, watch everything on OTT? This woman here in her 40s, live sports programming, deal breaker for me, not to quit my cable and satellite subscription. Next to there, this man in his 30s, he can't watch live shows, and some shows on OTT are only available for a short time. So if you go to a CBS All Access or a network app, they might have that current season show up. It won't be available maybe for 24 hours after the original airtime, and then they might only leave it up for a couple of weeks, things like that. And here, again, from our Forrester Technographics study, this statistic, 41% of people still say, I could never replace my current TV service with streaming services. But on the bottom there, this woman who says, if I could find a way to stream the same channels I now have, read that as be able to watch live TV, I would cut the cord in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
We're getting closer to that.
I have a question about sports in general too.
Yeah.
So we've seen things like Sling TV and DirecTV and even the Hulu's new entrants bring live things and live sports to consumers. So if you have like we actually ran a campaign on the NBA playoffs, and we're running it when we practice this webinar. It's over now. Sorry, Cavaliers. But but what happened is, where do you see the big challenges with sports still? Because that seems to be the thing that really holds people up.
Yeah, well, sports are a microcosm of what's holding everything up with OTT, which gets to the embedded business processes, contractual relationships, who gets to show what when, that has been evolved over the years, but is deeply, deeply entrenched in the way the industry works. Sports is a great example of that. One of the real nuances, and I'm going to go way down deep into the weeds of the television business for a second here, but it'll just illustrative of the complexities here. When DirecTV now launched last, I think it was November, they made a big deal out of the fact they had all 4 networks, or I guess they had 3 of the 4 networks, ABC, NBC, and Fox, and wasn't that great? They were kind of the first service that could really bring you a full set like that, and you look at that at first and go, yeah, now I can cut the cord. I'm not gonna, I'm gonna get all the stuff that I want. Big asterisk. You get the national feed. You may get some selected markets, probably I think it's the owned and operated stations, i.e., when, say ABC owns the stations in, I think it's like New York, LA, Chicago, maybe a couple of other markets. But if you're an affiliate station that the network doesn't own, they actually own the rights to broadcast the game of those hometown teams. So now you're sitting in, maybe here in Boston. I'm not sure what the O&O and affiliate situation here in Boston, but let's just say it's an affiliate station here in Boston. I can sign up to DirecTV now, and I don't get the Boston Red Sox or the New England Patriots. So you know what? It doesn't do me as much good as it should. So again, those are the real nuances, but they're important, and they're important sticking points for moving to a world that is fully streamed.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, we hear a lot about, people are cutting the cord right and left, blah, blah, blah. But when you look at the actual numbers, here from Leichman Research Group over the last couple of years, all right, so it goes from, TV subscriptions go from 49 million to 49.6 to 49.1. And other people might have some other statistics. In Q1 2017 came out. Looks like it's accelerating a bit more. But we're still talking about the vast majority of people still having a traditional pay TV subscription, and maybe it's declining at a couple of % a year. Now, for an industry like cable television that had 30 years of constant growth, this is, hit the panic button, oh my God, what's happening here? For any normal business, it's like, yeah, okay, you lose a couple of % of your customers. It's never good, but it's not like you're going out of business tomorrow. So the panic here is a little bit overblown. So let's move ahead to the next slide here. And when you look at, we see things like Sling TV and DirecTV. Sling TV's been out a couple of years. They have 1.4 million subscribers. DirecTV now, again, launched last November, 375,000 subscribers. So I ask you, you hear all this stuff about people hate their cable companies. They're dying to cut the cord. They're going to cut the cord in a heartbeat. Then why are these numbers so low? And I think we saw that answer before. These services still don't really offer everything that people want, and it's going to be a while before we get there. Next slide, please. And again, from our technographics research here, when we ask consumers about things like Hulu, PlayStation Vue, and Sling, I thought this was really interesting data, where I'm interested. There's 21% who say I'm interested, but have never subscribed to Hulu, and 52% who say, yeah, I know about Hulu, but I'm not interested in it. So when you look at Hulu's growth percentage, it's going to come from that 21% who are interested but just haven't gotten around to it. Similar sort of pattern for all of these. So again, if people are dying to cut the cord, why is there such relatively low level of interest in this? Interesting question, and part of it, I think, is merely kind of habit. People have deeply entrenched habits in television viewing, and once you get out of the little bubble that we all live in, I can't tell you how many times I go to conferences and present this kind of data, and people come up to me and say, your data's got to be wrong. Everybody I know has cut the cord or is using these services, and it's like, yeah, because everybody is in the little tech marketing kind of bubble that we all live in. Right. You go out into the real world and people are not as into technology as all of us are. So it's gonna take a little more to get there. And my colleague James McQuivey wrote this report about 1.5 years ago or so that I thought was really insightful. And he went even deeper into all these numbers that we have than I did. And his conclusion was, forget about cord cutting. It's the cord nevers who are the ones that are really going to cause the big shift. Let's go to the next slide. And what we mean by that is the people who have never had a cable subscription, of which there's a couple of groups. There are, as you can see here, of the 18% who have never had a cable subscription, the majority of those are over age 32, which means these are people who maybe they live in an area that cable doesn't reach, or in a lot of cases they're people who just don't value TV all that much. They don't watch that much. They're not willing to spend the money for a cable subscription. So it has nothing to do with anything that OTT actually can affect. And then you've got this other group of the 18 to 31s. Remember, our millennials, who are watching a lot more OTT, even though they haven't completely abandoned traditional television. The OTT viewing is a larger percentage of their viewing. So going forward, let's go to the next slide here. What happens is year over year, as the Grim Reaper takes older people away, and those younger people again mature, grow into the life stage of getting their own home and their own cable or their own choices around their viewing. By 2025 or so, we expect that about half of those will never have had a cable or pay TV subscription. So at that point, instead of the bulk of people still having a pay TV subscription, you're going to have half the households, maybe less than half the households in the U.S. with a cable subscription, and that is a reason for a business to hit the panic button, to look out over about 8 to 10 years and see their business shrinking by half. But on the other hand, if you've got 8 to 10 years to adapt to it and you can see it coming, hopefully you can come up with the right product offerings and strategies to address it. So again, don't go into a blind panic, go into a intensive digitization and transformation of your business to respond to these new consumers. Keep going. So where are we at right here, right? consumers want their long-form video entertainment, right? I don't know how many people are old enough to remember. I want my MTV. I want my TV. I want my long-form video entertainment. All right. They want it on the best available screen, and I'm going to introduce this term here that Rashad Tabakawala at Publicis shared with me a couple of years ago, and it's just a great. I think it's the absolute right thing. It's like, if I can get to my big TV screen, I want to watch there. If I can't, if I'm away from home, or if my spouse is watching something that I don't want to watch, great, I'll watch on my tablet or my laptop or my phone or something like that. So I want it available there, but I might not necessarily go to those other screens first. But clearly, consumers really don't give a hoot who created it. ABC, NBC, CBS, in the early days of cable, always touted, hey, people come to us because they know our content is so great. Netflix content, Amazon Prime content, HBO content, fantastic content. It no longer matters that you're one of the traditional big four broadcast networks. They don't really care how it gets to their screen of choice. If clearly a lot of people are still plugged into a cable, that's fine. If not, if it comes over the internet, that's fine. They don't care. They just want it. And they don't care who delivers it. They don't care whether it's Comcast or Netflix or anything else. So these changes are starting to happen, but habit is an extremely strong point of inertia. And for those of us in the digital world who have seen technology change incredibly quickly, and it seems to change, every couple of years, there's some totally brand new thing that comes along, that's not going to happen in this space. It just isn't. We've been waiting for this to happen to TV for 20 years, and it's just starting to get there. So what is happening? Let's keep going here. And give me the next slide. There we go. So how is this going to change TV planning? So let's start from a few years ago. Pick your number, 5 or 10 years ago. You had one screen. People sat down at 8 o'clock on Thursday night to watch their shows, and so you could reach a whole bunch of people. Click for me, please. That's not the world we live in anymore. As we saw before, as people are watching on other channels, and we've seen this in the ratings, the Nielsen ratings, since Nielsen is still struggling to come up with a metric to capture all of this viewing, they're still really only capturing linear TV and DVR viewing. This is what they're measuring. So click for me again. But those people are not stopping watching long-form video entertainment. They're watching on through other delivery channels like VOD, and you can go ahead and click a couple times for me. On their laptop, on their tablet, on their phone. And so you still likely, in all likelihood, got as many people, maybe even more people, watching some form of video entertainment as used to. They just happen to be watching it in all these different ways, not through the traditional broadcast linear model. So the challenge for marketers and TV planners in particular is, how do you reassemble that now highly fragmented market and audience? So click. And the key here is that this is the biggest change, you gotta flip from thinking about the content to thinking about the viewer. The old way of, and actually this question doesn't change. So who's watching what on Thursday night at 8 p.m.? Good old must-see TV. And for a lot of brands, you want to reach people before the weekend and, plant your brand in their head over the weekend, particularly for shopping and movies and things like that. And the way you used to do that was say, great, give me Big Bang Theory. It's got a 3-4 rating. I'm going to reach a lot of people I want to reach, and then I'll go buy some other stuff as well. And you're still going to do that because it still has a decent rating, a 2 or a 3 rating. But now you've got to be thinking about, okay, what is the kind of person I want to reach, and where do I reach them? I don't care as much about the programming Because maybe on our person who lives in this lovely kind of Frank Lloyd Wright style house on the right here, maybe they're not watching Big Bang Theory, but they may be dead in my target audience. They're watching something completely different. I don't really care. I just want to get my message in front of them. Click ahead, please. So now we've got to think about this world of audience-based buying. Get away from this idea of we're going to buy the content that has the high ratings, that reaches a whole bunch of people, but quite frankly, a lot of the people in that target audience are not really people that I want to advertise to because they're not going to buy my product. To this idea of audience-based, where we layer in some more data about who's actually watching that show, not just age and gender, but do we know something about their family structure, their income, their purchase habits in this category or for my brand, and now be a little more selective about which of those shows that I want to put my ads on, and pick shows that have a higher concentration of that key target audience. Still some waste because I'm still buying an ad in a program, but it gives me a better tool to reach more people. And then click ahead. Ultimately, we'll get to this world, and clearly there are some opportunities today for addressable buying, i.e., I can actually deliver to this exact household through this cable system or through this OTT delivery system, but I can actually get to a specific individual and make more like that digital programmatic individual impression kind of buy, though again the mechanics of it in the TV world are not going to work exactly the way digital does. But so we're getting into this world where we have these three different ways of buying. Click to the next one, and I want to just dive a little bit deeper on this idea of audience-based buying, because again, for digital people, this still seems really strange, that I'm still buying an ad in content, and I have to take the entire audience, whether they are my target audience or not, and I can't buy those individual viewers yet. But here's the advantage of it. If you look at, let's say we're an automaker and we're trying to reach minivan prospects. If we buy a typical show, if we go typically by ratings on the left-hand side for show A, maybe it's a highly rated show with a 3 rating, and it's going to index 100 for adults 25 to 54, and we can reach about a little less than 700,000 prospect households. Show B has a lower rating, but it actually indexes higher for minivan owners, not adults 25 to 54. And so therefore, I can reach 750,000 households instead of 690,000 households, probably at the same CPM, maybe even a little bit lower because I may be buying on a cable network or some other area that for various other reasons that I won't go into in the TV ecosystem doesn't get the high CPMs that primetime network does. So that's the advantage of audience-based buying, and it really is kind of a training ground, and it's a baby step from the old world of Nielsen ratings buying, on the way toward that fully addressable buying by bringing in some more of those kind of data sources and a little more targeting thinking. Keep going here. So what does this point to in the future? And this is a little bit of a thought experiment, but follow me if you will. Let's click ahead here. One thing is that media planners and buyers, I say, need to supersize their analytical skills. And when I was in the agency business, the media buyers were always the most Excel savvy people in the agency. They were using lots of different data sources, but they were using Nielsen and MRI and Simmons that are all survey-based data. So working with data sets that are based on tens, maybe at the most hundreds of thousands of households that are surveyed. In this new world we're moving into, where the data is based on the set-top box coming out of a household. You're now in the tens of millions of data points you're dealing with. And as Matt Spiegel here says, it's easier for digital buyers to learn TV than for TV buyers to learn digital. But many digital people underestimate the strategy and business dimensions of TV. So the digital people, we're already used to working with these big data sets and matching up data, from our first-party data to third-party data, taking that to our DMP, using that for targeting. So we're more familiar with that already versus TV buyers who are, again, thinking in these ideas of Nielsen ratings and these broad age gender groups. But I think what I like about this quote is it says that neither the digital video buyer nor the TV buyer is prepared for this future. This future is going to be somewhere in, you're going to need to have those big data skills and understand how to use that, but you also have to understand the strategic dimensions of television buying and the idea of the importance of reach and not just individual impression targeting. Click ahead there for me. And so this is a real thought experiment. At some point, I am predicting that the TV planning model will invert. Here's what I mean by that. Click ahead for me, please. So today, you start with your primetime inventory. We're in the middle of upfront season right now. Big advertisers talking to the networks, signing contracts for the 2017-2018 TV season. After that, click again for me. The next step is that you will go, overlay some cable, maybe some local, some other things to boost reach, and then you overlay, run of schedule to boost frequency and get a lower CPM, bring down your average CPM. Okay, so you're kind of building this. I start with this big, broad foundation of prime, and then I slot in some other things to cover it. But what happens in the future when we really have much more addressable and audience-based buying going on? Why wouldn't you start by identifying all of the addressable TV households that you can get? If you know you want minivan buyers, aren't you going to start trying to buy every one of those households in the market for a minivan? After that, you might actually go to addressable online. There's some households you can't reach on TV, but you could reach them online. They're minivan households. They have the same kind of profile. Maybe you'll go there next. Then you go to that audience-based buying. Let me buy some programs that, there's still plenty of linear TV viewing. Don't want to miss those people. But let me be selective about where there are a higher concentration of minivan buyers. And then, after doing all of those things, if I still need a little bit more reach and want to be a little bit broader, then go ahead and click to step 4, which is then maybe I'll buy some Prime or some other broadcast broad reach network. I don't know when this is going to happen. The TV business, as I've alluded to, moves so much more slowly than the digital business. It's hard to predict, but we'll keep an eye out for it and see whether I'm right over the next few years. Anyway, next slide. So here's my advice to all of you. If you're on the digital side, spend a little time. If you can find a mentor or a colleague who's knows the TV business inside and out, spend some time with them. Learn about reach and frequency. Learn about why that is important and the kind of impact that brings to a marketing plan. If you're on the traditional TV side, it is time to go find your mentor on the data and analytics side. Learn big data, understand the ins and outs of this kind of matching and segmenting targets more finely. But the other thing that this world leads to very quickly is that you're going to need to plan and buy multiple audiences. And what I mean by that is we're used to buying these broad, adult 18 to 49, 25 to 54, male, female, 25 to 54, whatever. And that's our one audience that we buy, and we go to every single network and every single programmer and say, this is what we're trying to reach. How many GRPs can you give me? As you start to think more about these audiences, now you need to think about what different segments drive my volume? And the obvious example here is something like diapers. Moms buy 70 or 80% of diapers, but dads buy some, grandparents buy some. So you might want to have 3 different audiences. There may be other segments that buy it. That's the way we're going to need to think about TV going forward. And that leads you to redefining benchmarks. You know, one of the big drivers these days, particularly in these upfront negotiations these days, is, you know, the advertiser says, well, I want to buy for $21.72 average CPM. Okay, in an adult, 25 to 54 world, you can use that. But when you start saying I want minivan buyers, it's going to be a different calculation, and you're not going to be able to expect to get the same kind of CPMs for that. And what you need to look at instead is, given the gain in efficiency by being more targeted, how much am I willing to pay to still meet my goals of revenue and profit based on that. And then finally, the world of closed loop measurement, even for television. The idea of being able to match, revenue to at least a rotation of ads, if not a specific ad. That's probably never get there, but the idea that I'm not going to be measuring my TV on GRP delivery anymore, but I'm going to be actually really looking at how much revenue it's driving. That is happening, and that's coming along really quickly. And I just looked at time. Oh my goodness, I took a lot more time than I was supposed to. Adam, I apologize, but let me turn it over to you.
It's all good. What I think is amazing is kind of how your research kind of leads into on the product side what we think about building out for the future. And we see OTT and addressable TV as kind of central to the strategy of what we've done here in the platform we've built. And I think that it leads into these slides where I don't have to explain so much going into it. So that's really great. Kind of leading in here, some of the things that kind of drive our business is we look at Forrester, we look at some other things that really excite us about this market. And data-driven targeting on TV. Jim said by 2025 about half of people will have traditional cable accounts. So the other half, those cable accounts are also going addressable, and everybody else is going to be probably on OTT or something like that. So one Credit Suisse media analyst actually said an additional $100 billion of U.S. annual TV sales will happen by 2030, 5 years after Jim's analysis. Now, this might be a little bit crazy, or maybe we'll go through a big inflation. I don't know. Maybe he's expecting that. Who knows? But it's really interesting in terms of the revenue there. And another interesting stat is in less than 5 years, linear streaming OTT will overtake traditional television in the U.S. So we're kind of seeing that already in terms of, when I look back, I actually used to run the mobile product here at dataxu. And the funny thing is OTT and mobile are kind of very similar in how they're executed. There's apps, right, on devices and streaming. And actually, when we saw mobile back in 2010, 2012 really start to take off, we're seeing the same sort of trends actually happening in the inventory and the kind of consumer engagement just this year, I'd say in the last couple quarters. So it's really interesting to see consumer engagement starting to really take off. So from our perspective, what we can bring to marketers with OTT and kind of the reason OTT kind of opens up these worlds. Jim talked a little bit about it on the audience targeting side, but the thing that it opens up is the fact that you're now streaming one-to-one to a household versus broadcasting, right? That totally changes the game for everything. And the real reason is, like, I'm actually able to control the pixels coming into a household, which is great. So what does that enable? One opportunity it enables is audience targeting. So we can help marketers eliminate those wasted impressions that we saw in Jim's presentation too. The other thing that allows you to do is to control the customer journey, right? You can actually, serve a different message to different households based on where they're at. Are they a new customer? Are they a potential customer? Or are they someone that's been around for a while and you want to keep around and give a positive message to, right? That's totally possible. And then finally, all of the investment that brands and advertisers are making on the data activation side, things like DMPs and understanding of customer personas, they can all start to translate very effectively into OTT. The other opportunity is frequency management. So we've talked a little bit about how broadcast has less control over frequency and the experience. Well, on OTT, you can actually control that. Some people actually have bad experiences with frequency in OTT right now. I know some people see the same ads over and over. That's not a technical limitation. It's kind of maybe a function of supply and maybe somebody buying too many ads. But with the right technology, people can control frequency even better than on linear TV. Maybe with those heavy TV watchers, people are seeing too many ads, and it's hard for a brand to control that. With OTT, that goes away. Also, it helps marketers achieve that optimal frequency, right? So you could start to add weight to certain households versus adding weight on a certain program, which is kind of interesting there. And you can also try to find consumers wherever they are, so that even under delivery in some respects is something that you don't want. You want to hit the right level of frequency for what your objectives are. And finally, what frequency management brings, the ability to coordinate frequency across channels, right? So I think Jim's analysis of starting with addressable buying desktop and mobile next, right, is interesting. And when you buy them together like that, you can actually think about frequency in the same way, where I want to be able to hit my frequency targets and combine all of that data into one, or all of that inventory into kind of one pool. And then finally, we talked about closed-loop measurement, right? So that means we can measure business outcomes, right? Just today, we're starting to measure actions from websites, from mobile apps, and even kind of offline data sets that are linked into the OTT viewing that we're seeing. The other beautiful thing about that is it enables us to optimize campaigns in real time. So we actually have a campaign right now where people are upgrading a mobile app. That's actually feeding a TV campaign that is automatically optimizing to people upgrading. So we're varying things like bid by program, apps that we're buying on, based on where we're seeing the high conversion rates right now. So it's totally possible to do that. Now, they had a pretty robust data infrastructure set up to pass us that data, but pretty much everybody's going to have something like a DMP implemented very soon if they don't. And if you haven't done that yet, I would suggest you get your data in order, because it's coming, and the people that are going to control their data and feed that out to other channels like a DSP that can actually take advantage of that, they're going to be very effective in their marketing. So how does this all work? So at dataxu, we believe that the graph, the cross-device graph, is fundamental to being able to take advantage of OTT. As you heard from Jim, the measurement right now for Nielsen and GRPs, it doesn't really work there right now. It works in some places, but people aren't buying OTT right now because they don't know what to do with it, right? They're used to buying TV, but they can't measure Nielsen. But then people don't convert on TVs. But when you actually look at a cross-device graph and you layer that in, when I have a definition of a person, right, with multiple devices, and then I also have a household with a TV connected to it, and I'm able to see all of that at once, what we can start to do is, see that Wendy here in this picture on her tablet is a frequent user of your app, and then when she ends up watching HGTV on Sling, we can send her a premium upgrade message right there. And then let's say right after that she goes on her laptop because maybe she doesn't want to convert on her tablet for some reason. She feels comfortable on her laptop. She upgrades her account. We can count that business outcome back to that TV campaign through the graph. And then the other great thing what we can do is we can actually start to serve different ads. Let's say you bought a chunk of inventory, you have to use it, right? You can serve a different message instead of the same old upgrade message, right? You can start to control that journey, or you can actually choose not to buy that impression if you have that capability. Depends on how your kind of programmatic buy is set up, but that's totally possible to be able to do. So, Jim talked a little bit about the kind of changing world of TV, and I think it has implications across planning, targeting, creative delivery, and ultimately optimizing, right? So what we're building at dataxu is a platform to kind of move into this new world where planning kind of goes from using panels to plan campaigns around, high indexing TV shows, into using your data to figure out what people you want to purchase, what shows you might want to purchase based on your data, and who to target, right? So the targeting really becomes about the segmentation and not just the shows of the networks. However, linear is not all going away altogether, so you're still going to have to buy shows. Find the ones that your own audience is on. And then for the creative delivery side, you're typically broadcasting a message to a household. But in OTT, we can dynamically insert the best message for a household. So right now I have an advertiser that is testing on a daily basis different types of creative to deliver a CPA outcome, which is kind of crazy, right? So they're actually a direct-to-consumer brand who is, selling something where people are on the website buying, and we're able to tell them which creative in real time is performing well, and we optimize to one or the other creative based on where they're at and where kind of the consumer sentiment is going. And then finally, what that means is that for optimization, you're not doing weekly, monthly, quarterly optimization. You're optimizing to your business outcomes every day, right? So that's really one of the fundamental ways that TV is changing. And we're starting to see it right now. I'm not saying you can take your whole TV plan and put it into OTT right now, but what you could do is start testing and learning and seeing how this scales. And when you understand how it works, when it does start to really scale, you're going to be best prepared for taking advantage of that as you start to learn right now. So, again, how can you transform your marketing today? I can't stress enough is continue investing in your data infrastructure and your understanding of customers. So from everything from collecting data across channels to integrating that with, technology platforms off the board for things like audience as well as conversion, right? Because conversion and ROI, connecting to ROI is super important. Take that customer data and elevate that to customer understanding, right? Know what your actionable segments are. Are these the people that have come to your website but not purchased? Are these people that are long-term customers that may be at risk because you haven't heard from them in a while? If you don't know who those people are, you're not going to be able to message them. And then 3, once you have that in place and you have a little bit of a plan, start testing that today. And we can totally help you out with that. And here's an example of one customer, Columbia Sportswear, who was able to target outdoor enthusiasts on television through connected TV, measure things like people coming to their site and actually engaging with the products on the site. And right here is what we did is we used our OneView technology to scale into that targeting, to measure it, and to understand the lift that actually happens inside of a campaign. So it's a super cool use case. They're a great customer, and I'm super happy to be able to talk about this case study. There's a lot of other cool things starting to happen right now in connected TV. So I think that's it from me. And we have time, like 4 minutes for questions.
Yes. Thanks, Adam and Jim. A few questions that have come in over the last few minutes. And Jim, I think this one's well suited for you. What's your take on YouTube viewership relative to OTT?
Completely different. It's another sort of supplemental thing to the long-form video entertainment viewing. In general, now, you do get the millennials, which have some different viewing habits and things, but it falls into the short-form entertainment that typically, again, I can dig into our consumer technographics data that tells you that that's the kind of stuff that is viewed typically on the phone, on a tablet, and often away from home. So it's a very, very different kind of viewing than that, come home after work and plop down for a couple hours before you go to bed, couch potato stuff.
Sometimes I get lost on YouTube.
Well, But it is that great opportunity to build on your long-form video entertainment advertising plan to extend your reach or to engage with people when they're in a different kind of mindset at a different time of the day, and that can definitely add effectiveness to your overall plan.
Awesome.
Sure. Another question that just came in. Where are we, and Jim, you talked about this a little, where are we in the adoption of OTT by brand advertisers? How significant of a part of their media plan is this yet? And, when can we anticipate seeing it take over a little bit more?
Yeah, that's one of those things. I mean, personally, I still far too often have the experience where I'm watching something OTT and it's the same dumb ads in every pod for the next hour. Which shows me that the sellers, the content owners, are not able to sell enough different advertisers to rotate the ads differently, and B, the advertisers are kind of, I would say, naive and not really paying close attention to the terms of the contract that they're buying, because they should not allow that kind of repetition. So all of that says to me, there are some advertisers starting to dabble in it. It's starting to get there, but we have a long, long way to go. And at the root of it, I think, Adam, you alluded to this, it's like if it's not measured by Nielsen, and again, my benchmark that I've used for 50 years is Nielsen ratings, and I can't measure this new stuff by Nielsen, I don't really know what to do with it.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting. And we also see kind of another challenge, which is like OTT is like this kind of tweener where you've got digital people that are buying it, you've got linear people that are buying it, and you've got the kind of two worlds are colliding right here. And whose budget is it? Like, whose metrics do we look at? Do we look at GRPs? Do we look at ROI? Oh my God, like, what do we do? And there's not a clear answer to that on what agencies and advertisers are doing. And some people are, kind of bifurcating in terms of, maybe both teams buy the same thing and measure it differently. Obviously, that's not the best thing for the brand, but that's kind of what I see happening. Where do you see that role kind of going,
Nice.
and like, what team's going to own it?
Well, as I said before, I don't think either of those groups has the real combination of skill sets needed to do this most effectively. And I think the idea of digital people buying, long-form video entertainment, digital people tend to be, again, much more lower funnel, action kind of oriented, and that's really not what that messaging does. In my advertising agency days, I was in a direct marketing agency, so we did some DRTV. We never bought prime time. Has the largest audiences. Why wouldn't you buy it? A, it's too expensive, and B, people actually want to watch the shows. So, okay, this is back in the deep, dark pre-internet days. So, then they had to get up off their sofa, go to their phone, call the 800 number. Now, at least now, they've got their laptop or their tablet or whatever, they can go to the website. So maybe it's not so much a problem anymore. But people are involved with the show, so they don't want to miss anything. So expecting them to take an action on that kind of programming is just wrong.
Interesting.
Great. Certainly a lot to think about. Jim, Adam, thanks so much for joining us today, and everyone on the line, thank you for joining us for Is 2017 the Year of OTT? Have a great day.
Everybody.
Cool. Thanks all.